Bank of Trinidad and Tobago, RBTT, for US $18 million, where they offered the medical benefit scheme. And I'm sure you also have that document and that proposal on file in the Ministry of Health and the Medical Benefits Board. I'm sure the minutes of the various board meetings at Medical Benefit Scheme would reflect that proposal from RBTT. Madam Speaker, all that was left to do was the finishing of the hospital, which included tiling, painting, landscaping, as well as the installation of the additional equipment. The vast majority, Madam Speaker, of which was simply purchase them, roll them in, plug in, and go. It's not rocket science. But Madam Speaker, the people of this fair land will judge for themselves, because I'm sure they're not blind. And prior to March 23rd, 2004, they would have seen for themselves how far advanced that building was sitting up on that mount. So the people will judge how far along that project really was. So it's not good enough for you to come and say 68% or 78%, or I am to say 90%. The people of this country, if there's one thing for sure, they ain't stupid, and they can see very well. But Madam Speaker, in the face of all of this, the Health Minister, the Honourable Member for St. John's Rural North, in his usual deceitful modus operandi, Madam Speaker, every time he comes to speak about this hospital, Madam Speaker, he said to the nation that all they found was a shell. I'm quoting him. He said on Observer Radio, when they came into office, Mount St. John was a shell. But instead of consulting with Dr. Joey John and others who were fully in tune with the project, they spent years, Madam Speaker, trying to figure out how to use government in the sunshine to legitimize their disgraceful opposition vendetta against a first world medical facility that the people of Antigua and Barbuda richly deserve. Remember, Madam Speaker, when the Honourable Prime Minister, the member for St. John's Rural West, and the Honourable Member for St. John's Rural North, and the late Leonard Timrector, they marched up and down that mount with placards in their hand in full opposition to that hospital. Madam Speaker, the UPP detractors were so unrepentant in their opposition to Mount St. John that they even placed an most ugly and environmentally unfriendly $100 million place to park cars before this important facility that affects people's lives. Madam Speaker, they wanted to sell it off to be used as something other than a hospital when they first came to office. But that did not work. They wanted to sell it to someone to do some sort of private hospital for the rich and famous. But that too did not work, Madam Speaker. Then they decided to lease it, and they actually held negotiations for leasing it for the purpose of operating along the lines of a private hospital for the rich and famous. Halberton and its healthcare hours would be for the poor, ordinary people of Antigua and Barbuda.
Madam Speaker, I must interject, because in my presentation, point of information.
I'm not yielding. If it's a point of order, I'll yield.
A point of order. Misleading the public, Madam Speaker, and the House. Madam Speaker, in my presentation, I presented very clearly documents outlining from the government what the intention of the government was, through documents from the Stanford Financial Group and to the Pan American Health Organization. But the information that is being presented, but you're factually incorrect, Madam Speaker, and he continues to
Madam
do this
Speaker,
time
that's not
and
a
time.
point of order.
He has no information-based anything.
Sit down, man. That's not a point of order.
Well, stop misleading the general public.
You had your chance. Sit down.
Stop misleading the
Honourable
people.
members, Honourable member for St. John's Rural North, maybe the other honourable member does not have the information that you, I don't think he was here, so maybe he doesn't have the information that from which you quoted. So maybe you should give him copies of the document. Well, give them to him anyway. Yes, and maybe in that way he will stop as you accuse him of misleading the public. So please make those documents available to him.
But what is his point of order, Madam Speaker? Pardon me? I do not know what the point of order is, Madam Speaker. Yeah, but you allow him to rise, Madam Speaker. I told him I'm not yielding. He did not raise a point of order under the standing rules, and he's still allowed to continue. He raised a point of elucidation. Am I right, Mr. Leader? Anyway.
Honourable member,
yes.
I rule. Would you continue?
Then, Madam Speaker, they have come full circle, 360 degrees, a total volte-face, right where we begun. You have come right away, right around, my dear member for St. John's, Rural North. Madam Speaker, right back to the original Antigua Labour Party plan of operating the state-of-the-art facility primarily for all Antiguans and Barbudans. Even so, Madam Speaker, we still do not know exactly how they plan to get it done. Because in his lengthy 2-hour presentation to this House, he has not told us or given us one scintilla of evidence how the government intends to get it done. We are being kept in the dark as to how this hospital is really going to operate. The heart and soul of this bill, Madam Speaker, can be found in the 25 sections of the Antigua and Barbuda Hospitals Board Act, 1999. Go back and read it. An act, Madam Speaker, clearly meant to be temporary, transitional. It's now adopted wholesale by the UPP with no new value added after 10 years later, Madam Speaker. No original ideas added. They just took the transitional legislation that we passed in 1999 with no new added value to it. And that was a transitional piece of legislation to get you from Alberton to Mount St. John. Indeed, Madam Speaker, what differentiates the 1999 Act of the Antigua Labour Party from the UPP initiative before us today is essentially, Madam Speaker, the broad and sweeping power that the UPP has found, Madam Speaker, necessary to grant to the Minister. For example, Madam Speaker, 10 years later, and 5 long years of government in the sunshine, the UPP has neither the good governance foresight nor the courage to break with the much criticized status quo that they criticized us when we were in government, and to depoliticize the composition of the board. So, if you look, Madam Speaker, as per the provisions of Section 4, it will be business as usual. Let's look at Section 4, Madam Speaker, on page 5. Business as usual. And the Minister will now decide which of his party supporters will serve on the board. Madam Speaker, we have before us a golden opportunity, Mr. Minister, on the platform of good governance, to move away from the partisanship that has infected the running of state institutions. Yet, Madam Speaker, instead of allowing the office of the Governor General, the parliamentary opposition, and the professional associations of business people and medical